Okay, today doing another brake job. We're going to swap the pads out on a 3 Series. This one's a 2003 330i ZHP, and we're going to do the front brakes today. The pads I'll be using are these Brembos. I have to say, one thing I just thought was pretty cute was that they individually packaged them. I thought that was neat. So rather than just having loose brake pads in there, they wrap each set for each side separately. But the exact same thing, it's just brake pads. Okay, so the wheel is off now. Here is your brake rotor and your brake caliper, and inside that are the pads. We'll need to take off this spring, as well as take out the 2 bolts up and down on the back. The first thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to compress the piston. You can sort of see it back there. That's the piston that pushes out the brakes. And I'm going to do that by putting my screwdriver inside the air vents on the rotor, but inside here, and then prying it gently. Okay, but just to reiterate, this is not touching the surface of the brake rotor. I might have to get a shorter screwdriver. Okay, now with the top and bottom bolts out, here's what they look like. We'll grease these 2 before we put them back in so they slide easy, so the brake can actuate properly. But with those out and springs off, we're going to pull off the caliper. Once you pull off the caliper, we'll pull out the pads. The back one's held by a spring. We'll pop that out. There you go. Here's the top pad. As long as I'm not in my own way here. I mean, I had tons of life left there. Anyhow, here's the bottom ones. They look stupid, but they're technically okay. Okay, so that's the old pads out. New pads would go back in. I'm gonna come. Here's what the caliper looks like. See the little hole in the center of that piston? That's where you'll put the spring held one. I'm gonna show you what the old pads look like here next. Okay, here's the new pads. This is the one that's gonna be put into the piston because it has the spring. Okay, comparatively, it's got tons more pad left on it. I guess the other ones are like half done. This is the one that will be outer. This is the same on both sides, so all we're just doing the passenger side, same thing on the driver. If you do have a brake wear sensor, it actually just pokes right into this notch right here in the pads. And if you want to see one with a brake wear sensor, you can check out my rear brake video. Okay, next I'm going to pop those in. Okay, pad with the spring goes in, and obviously the shape, the wider part goes to the exterior, just like the wheel. There we go, those are in. Now next, sometimes I can get it to fit if I put this pad on first, but other times I actually have to put it on afterwards. And this looks like it's going to be another one of those after ones. So I'm going to take this off. Well, actually, I'll try this. Put that in there just like it's supposed to be, you know. And then put this one over top of it. There. Okay, caliper's back on. Hopefully you get to see some of that. But now that it's back on, we're going to put on those 2 bolts, and then we'll put the spring back on. We should be good. Okay, so first is the bolts. Here's one of them. Now each one of these, before I put it in there, will you send me that box? I just need the white grease actually from inside of it. Yep. Brembo included some grease, so what we're going to do is we're going to grease the bolts before we put it in there. The reason that's important is that these bolts are what the caliper slides back and forth on. So if it was dry, you could get unwear, uneven pressure applied during braking. So we will grease these up. I'm not going to be very no magic to this to me. Okay, it's going in the top one. And same scenario with the bottom bolt. There's the bottom one. I'm going to grease it up. I have memories of changing the brakes in the rain in the dirt driveway of my youth. Can you get me a paper towel, sweetie? Yeah. I think there's one off the side. I'm wiping my hands with this and this is making my hands dirtier. Thank you. Put in the dust caps. Okay, so with those back bolts on, next thing is just to do that spring. Okay, here's the spring. The way I'm going to do this one is I'm going to put the bottom section on first, basically. So there it is. And then we're going to pry it to... the spring is what gives it some ability to not torque. Okay, so that stabilizes it a little bit. Okay, so then I'm going to pry from this side to get that in. There we go. Feels like it should be back a little bit further. Tappy tap tap. Okay, but with that, with the spring in, pads are on, brake job is done. Next step though is before you take it anywhere, you need to step on the brake. And the reason is because we pushed out the piston as far as it could go, and when we step on the brake the next time it's going to start filling up the gaps until it closes. Anyway, you don't want that to happen on the first stop. That's important. So you need to do that before you leave the garage. Step on the pedal a couple times till it gets really firm, then give it a couple practice stops because you need to set it in place. But from a brake job, next thing is just put on the tire and we're ready to go. Hopefully it helps.